Welcome to Come Rain or Shine with Dan Cockerell. This is the show where we explore the power of leadership and culture on your organization's success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and joining us, at least for the moment, from Orlando, Florida, Dan Cockerell. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Jody, what's going on? You mentioned earlier today's the solstice in Washington. Well, it's solstice everywhere, but it's going to start getting a little brighter every day, a little lighter every day.
That's right. And that is a big deal to us in the Northwest because we're so far north, it's just so dark and gloomy and in the winter. And yes, we have a lot more dark days, but I just have the fun fact knowing that every day we're going to get a little more light because there are some places in the world where it's the opposite, like they're getting
Right,
more darkness, and
right. The power of positive thinking,
the
a little
power of
lighter.
positive thinking a little lighter. So I enjoy that because the solstice just passed. It's all uphill from here. Before you know it, it's July, August, September, where I live. Best place in the country.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Well, this, Jody, we'll let all our listeners know this is our last episode of Come Rain or Shine.
What? You could have told me beforehand.
Yeah, this is it's a little bit of an emotional moment. It seems Jody and I were doing some calculations just before we started the show here, and we got just under 5.5 years of episodes weekly for 5.5 years.
That's something not many people accomplish, Dan. And we have done well. The last two episodes were repeats of two of Dan's favorite episodes.
Right,
So it depends if you count those or not. If you
right.
don't count those, we have done 285 episodes, 287 with those. That is a heck of a run, Dan. The average podcast lasts 10 episodes, and you've done 287.
That's awesome. That's great. Great to hear. So just to let everyone know, so life is full of chapters. And when I Valerie and I left Disney 5.5 years ago to set out and run our own consulting speaking company, another chapter of our book was being written, and it's been an incredible ride. We've learned so much, traveled around the world, shared our wisdom and our knowledge and our experience with audiences. We've often learned more than we taught by going to these countries and meeting entrepreneurs and meeting incredible business people and very interesting people. And about probably 9 months ago, Valor and I started talking about what the next chapter was going to be. The travel is pretty intense. And I'll tell you, after running in teams and working on teams for 26 years in my career, and then for 5.5 years, kind of being paid to tell people what they should do, getting paid and leaving, I was feeling an itch to get back in the game and put all this to the test, all the advice and all the things I was telling everyone. So I did what a lot of us do. I started just reaching out to people I knew and just kind of saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about going back into the business world and working and running a team and running having some goals and objectives. And if you hear about anything, just let me know." And on October 23rd, I called a guy, Carl McDonald. He's the chief operating officer, the CEO of Strategic Education. And he hired me actually 23 years ago at Epcot. So we had been in touch, but he hired me once and we chatted for a few minutes. And I told him, I'm thinking about doing something. If he hears about anything, let me know. And about 5 minutes in the conversation, he said, "Well, Dan, I think I might have an interesting opportunity for you." So, I hung up the phone and Valerie says, "Hey, how's Carl doing?" I said, "He's good." I said, and I think he just offered me a job pending some additional interviews. And she said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "No." And she said, "Well, where is it?" I said, "It's East Coast." She said, "Washington, D.C.?" I said, "No, the East Coast of Australia, Sydney." And so that's where I'm going to be headed. I'm going to be the CEO, Chief Operating Officer of Torrens University. It is the only for-profit university, investor-owned university in Australia. It's been around for about 10 years. and they have a really interesting portfolio. I'm not going to get in all the detail about that, but it checks off a lot of boxes. Living abroad, traveling internationally, having a little bit of predictability and consistency in our lives, so we can actually get a good workout in, and sleep in our own bed almost every night, and then work for an organization that's driven by a mission. Disney was great, being driven by creating magical memories for guests that would last a lifetime. And that was such an inspirational place to work. And Torrance has 20,000 students, and half of them are international. They're coming from all over the world, a lot from Southeast Asia, to learn and create new opportunities in their lives. And so not only is it a really cool job, but it's going to be a very mission focused job to help young people kind of prepare for this world and be successful. So as we're doing that, we're figuring out how we wrap up our 5.5 years of consulting and speaking and everything. And this is one of the pieces. Jody has been an incredible support, incredible mentor along the way. Got me started with podcasting, has connected me with so many different people, and I've kind of taken that lesson now to pay it forward, like we always do. And when I talk to people who are leaving corporate jobs and going out to consult or try something, not only do I refer them sometimes to Jody, but I just talk to them myself and spend time giving them advice and sharing my successes and my mistakes and the things I wish I knew earlier and the way I should have paid attention to. But the way I look at it, it's a big move, it's a big change, but it's just another chapter. And this chapter will last for however long it'll last, and then the next chapter will come up in a few chapters from now, and it'll be something else. And so the big thing for me is life is full of these moments, and you get to go do different things, and you're never done. That's probably the biggest thing. You're never done learning. You're never done with the opportunities. You just have to see them and decide that you're still willing to play the game and not be finished.
This is so exciting for Dan. It's a little sad for the rest of us. For me, because now I don't get to do this every week with Dan, and I know it's probably shocking news to hear that this is the last episode of the podcast, and we didn't warn you ahead of time, but that's also because we didn't know it did escalate kind of fast,
That's
and
right.
this is the first time Dan and I have recorded together since we knew, and it's our first chance to tell you is also our chance to say goodbye. And I appreciate all the kind words, Dan. This has been such a fun podcast to do, and it's certainly allowed us to get to know each other better. And I now even more, I really enjoyed the recent trip we did to Zion and Bryce Canyon, but now it's even more meaningful. I had no idea you were leaving me when we did that trip.
Neither did I. So so that's great, Jody. I'd written down, this is not an exhaustive list, but I was thinking about the past 5.5 years of becoming an entrepreneur and running our own business and that kind of thing. I just want to share a few bullet points. I'm not going to get too deep into all of them, but some things I think I've learned along the way. First of all, the concept of momentum. This is one of the hardest things when you start out on your own as an entrepreneur, is getting momentum. I think every speaker, every consultant's like, well, how do I get my first gig so I can do a great job and get referred for the second gig? And that's probably the hardest thing to do. And so this idea of reaching out to your network, reaching out to the relationships you have, just and having the courage that take those opportunities to get out there is a big deal. And something you taught me, Jody, I know you said, when you start doing something different, there's a delay. There's a delay of maybe sometimes a few months before you start to see the results of it. And that could be social media, that could be sales. I saw that recently play out. I started to add videos to my article of the weeks. So I've been doing my article of the week for over 20 years. And I said, I want to make this even better. And so I've been embedding videos every week, and it was business as usual. And then in the past month, I think I had another 1,000 subscribers sign up. So it's that idea of momentum. When you do something differently, just keep at it, and you're going to see the results of it over time. I think number two, differentiation. You got to differentiate yourself. The world is full of people doing what you do. Whatever you do, there's a whole bunch of other people doing it also. And so, what makes you different? And a lot of people say, "Well, I don't want to be different. I want to be like appealing to everybody." And I've learned that when you're appealing to everybody, like they say, you're appealing to nobody. You really got to know who you are and differentiate yourself and hone in on that thing that people are going to remember. So it's a very big world. There's a lot of talented people out there. And so, what is different about what you do and how you do it? Number three, when it comes to what you do as an entrepreneur, even in leadership, it's not about you. It's not about you. And that's something I think Valor and I learned along the way when we talked to potential clients. At the beginning, we always talked about what we do, why our backgrounds and who we are to try to let them know we have this credibility. And that was a little bit of important, but at the end of the day, they don't care about us. They care about what we can do for them. And so we really learned um, quickly when we're talking to people, it's about not saying who we are and what we do. It's about who are you and what do you need? And once we understand that, we're either going to figure out we're a great fit for you or we're not a great fit for you, but we can find someone that's going to help you, or we're not sure we can help you. But it's not about you. And the sooner you realize that in sales, the sooner you're going to realize you're going to see people really interested in what you have to say because you're focused on them and not you. Um, Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm goes a long way. Having a positive, upbeat, optimistic tone, bringing energy to the conversation. Now, you need to know what you're talking about, but a sense of enthusiasm is something that people are attracted to. And if you can do things with enthusiasm, I'd call it a differentiator, but it's also going to put you out there, make you memorable. And people like being around people who are enthusiastic about what they do. The next one, provide value first. So this kind of comes back to a little bit of it's not about you. I get, and I don't know about you all, but on LinkedIn, I get notes every single day. Hi, Dan, I'm this person and I have search engine optimization. Would you like to buy it? And let's get on a call. Everyone wants you to do something for them right away. And what I found is the ones that have stuck out for me are the people who provide value first. And I've seen people say, hey, Dan, I was on your website and I noticed, some links weren't working. Would you like to know what they are? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And I have a conversation with them. I may or may not buy something from them, but they're investing in me first. They're not just trying to get something from me. So a lot of times, can you provide value first to people? And once you provide value, they're much more likely to want to work with you. And then the last one, I'll call it referrals. Referrals. Valor and I today were taking our morning walk and we were talking about social media. We could not think of a time in the past 5.5 years someone called or emailed us and said, hey, I saw you on Instagram and I want you to come speak to my company. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't work. There are people that do that and it works well. But what we have found that every piece of business we've got in the past 5.5 years has been from someone who knew someone who knew someone who knew us. They had been to one of our keynotes, they had been to one of our sessions, they talked to somebody else, and they ended up reaching out to us, or someone had emailed them and told us about us. And so it's such a powerful piece when you get referred by somebody, you're more likely to listen to them and you're more likely to follow through. And we've seen that as just such a powerful piece of our business. And that becomes back to making sure you're providing value. Because when you do a great job for people, they want to talk to others about you and they want to tell others about you. And it's the way you grow a business. So gain momentum over time and know that things don't happen quickly. Differentiate who you are, how you talk to people, what your product is, what your service is. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the person you're here to help and with. Enthusiasm is a huge differentiator. Provide value first for people and then really hone in on that personal relationships and creating personal value for referrals, and you'll grow your business. So those were my 6 things I just jotted down that I think have been a big lesson for me over the past 5.5 years, and which I'm also taking forward into my new job as I get settled, is to know that this is going to create some good value that I've seen. Not all I haven't not always done this successfully, but I know these are some keys that I've seen to success.
Well, I had two things I wanted to make sure I asked you on our final episode, and you just answered one of them, and that is what have you learned in the 5.5 years of Cockerell consulting that will serve you going forward? Dan just told us that. So we're not going to go there. I have one more question, but first I want to mention, to me, one of the really cool things about this podcast and working with Dan the last 5.5 years was when COVID hit. I saw Dan do something pretty spectacular, and he said, "Man, this is tough on my business." And I imagine if it's tough on my business, it's tough for a lot of other people too. So let's find a way to give to people. And we launched a daily podcast, I think only for 30 days, right, Dan? But it was
Yep.
daily for 30
Yep.
days called Limits to Lemonade. And Dan even tried out some joke telling on that. Now, usually flopped, but and mine were really funny. But uh,
Yeah, I don't think we remember that the same way, but keep going.
so that was a really neat to see. If I'm feeling this, other people are feeling it. Let's give back. The other thing Dan did at the same time is he just put it out there that I may start a mastermind group for people that need help while they're going through this. And I think Dan was hoping for 10 people, and 100 people applied. And Dan, actually, I think it was about 250. And then Dan said, "Well, we can't accommodate all of them, so let's do 10 groups of 10." And Dan and I led a mastermind call every day for 3 months because each group met every other week. So 10 groups, that means Dan and I were with people every day. And I just learned a lot from that, Dan. You could have easily sat back and said, "Oh my goodness, I just lost a lot of business. All my speeches have been canceled. No one's booking anything." And instead, you turned it around and said, "If I'm feeling it, there may be other people feeling it worse. So let's go find them." And that really had an impact on me. And it was just neat to watch the reaction, because it did help a lot of people to have that daily message of encouragement, or to be in a group and get the chance to learn from you and other people. And it's just one of those. I Dan mentioned before that there's a delay. There's usually like 9 months, depending on what you're doing. And there, Dan was just throwing out all sorts of value to people. And I'm sure we don't need to talk about it, but I am sure that Dan got a return on that later,
Yep.
even though that's not why he did it. But Dan got a return on that later. So that was really fun to watch. And I also like how Dan has just tried different things. We had a online community for a while, for about a year, and that was just fun until Dan just couldn't do it because of the travel schedule. But that was neat to watch how that. So it's been really fun watching you try this different stuff. I've learned a lot from you, Dan. And I know this is not meant to be a Dan Cockrell appreciation episode,
Well,
but
no, we can make it that. That's okay. Keep going.
yeah, we certainly could. So let me move from that to the other thing that I want to talk about. When Dan started this, it was this show, it was just me and Dan, almost all the episodes. And then he wanted to start having interviews. So it would be me and Dan interviewing other people. And then it moved to, we would both be there, but Dan would do the interviews. And it finally got to Dan saying, "I'm having so much fun. I just want to keep interviewing people." And Dan took over his own show, which was great. A lot of good interviews, all that. And then we came back where it was Dan and I, as it is, as we close this. So 5.5 years, Dan, more than 280 episodes. What is it that you learned specifically from podcasting that you'll take forward into your new role?
Boy, gosh. I think the thing that you had taught me, Jody, which gave me the confidence at one point to become the host of the show and interview others, is really taking an interest in others. And it's taught me how to ask questions. It's taught me to listen. It's taught me, something you're really great at is, and as we've done these podcasts, I'll talk and I'll talk and I'll talk, and then I'll just stop talking. And you have a way to come back, recap what I just said, ask an additional question. And that just takes a different skill set. And that's probably one of the things that really has been, it's helped me not only on the podcast, but when I go out and meet people consulting or after keynote speeches or being in that moment, asking really pointed personal questions to make people feel valued, to learn something new and be curious. And that's been something that's been fantastic. Because if you'd put me in front of a microphone 5.5 years ago and said, interview this person, no way. There's no way. But you practice, and by practicing, you get better at things. And now it's really helped me become even more fluid as I interact with people all over the world and have the confidence to really, talk to them in a personal way and dig into who they are, why they do what they do. I learn a lot. It makes them feel good, and we get a lot of value out of that.
Very, very good. And I will say one of my proudest moments of the show, we were recording live with Jamie and JJ Eubanks, well, separately, but they were both there and they had a film crew. It was at their conference and a lot of people in the room. And Dan did the episodes without me. I brought the equipment, I set up the equipment, and Dan did the interviews without me. And after each one, everyone was saying, Dan, you are so good at this. You're such a good interviewer. You're such a good podcaster. And that I don't mean to steal your pride, Dan, but that
Mm,
made me so proud. Not necessarily of you, sure, but also of what we had accomplished because I knew when we started that wouldn't have happened. And if it had, people wouldn't have been complimenting you on how good you are. But this, because of what we've done on the show, you really stood out to everyone in the room on what a good interviewer you were. And yeah, someone could say, "Oh, Jody, you're a good interviewer," and I get this is bragging a little bit, and my granny would slap my jowls if I said this in front of her.
mm.
But if someone says, "Hey, you're a good interviewer," I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I've been at it a while. I've done like 2,000 episodes." But to see you get to the point where a room full of people were saying, "Dan, you're so good at this," to me that was like the peak of the show. I'm like, "Yeah, this
That's cool.
we've come a long way." This so
Yep. Yep. Very cool story, Jody. And I agree with it. And that, I'll tell you, that applies to anything in life. You spend time practicing, spend time on what you're doing, you get better, and you get better to a point where you get really good and you can create value. You could recognize for that. It's just repetition and consistency, which are really two really hard things to do in life with everything we deal with.
yeah, so there it is, the whole package. It's coming to an end. Dan and I have had a great run. I've talked about how much I appreciate Dan, but even more than that, I appreciate you that you've taken the time to listen to us every week for 5.5 years. And had I been thinking ahead, I would have pulled up the stats and I could tell Dan where listeners are from and all of that. I didn't even think of it until now. But Dan, people listen from all over the world. And so
Right.
that's good. But I appreciate you. Dan and I wouldn't do this if it wasn't for you. We have absolutely delighted in hearing from you when you reach out. And it makes it worth it. Because when you record a podcast, you're in a room by yourself. I know Dan and I together, but I'm in Washington State. He's in Orlando. I'm in a room by myself. And you never know the impact you have or people listening to the message, but then we hear from you and it makes it worthwhile. That is what has made this 5.5 years so delightful is yeah, working with Dan's been okay, but it's hearing from you and knowing that you listen and you like what we do. That's made all the difference for me.
Yep. And then two additional things I'm thinking about, Jody. One is my article of the week I've been doing for over 20 years. That's going to continue. It's going to go to an article of the month. With my new job, I'm not going to be able to do a video every week, but I'm going to be doing that. And we'll put that link in the show notes. I just couldn't bring myself to shut it down. I can't, it's like you walking 10,000 steps every day. I just can't stop doing it. But we're going to adjust it to once a month, sending an article out with a video. So if y'all are interested, click on that, subscribe to that. It's free and we can stay in contact. And then the other thing is, uh, you know, this idea of, hey, Dan, now that you're, moving to Sydney, Australia with Valerie, and while you're down there, I'm sure there's a lot of places in Southeast Asia and places to visit. Where are you going? And I don't know where I'm going, but I know who I'm going to call if I want to book something. And that is Magical Vacation Planner. So I want to thank JJ and JB Eubanks and the whole Magical Vacation Planner team, the MVP team, for sponsoring our podcast for the past 5.5 years and giving us all this great support. that organization does a great job, and I just want to give them a shout out because we really appreciated their helping us along the way here.
They have been so wonderful to us, Jamie and JJ, and all of the travel advisors from Magical Vacation Planner. We go to their conference every year. They have treated us so well. We've got to meet so many of them individually. It has just been wonderful. And I should mention you can call them at 407. I think I wrote the number wrong. This is a good thing to do on the very
Well, we
last.
haven't been doing this long, Jody, so it's normal you couldn't remember the number.
I know. There we go. 407-442-0257. And they have been just wonderful to us. And they were willing to take a chance on Dan and sponsored from episode 1, which that was a bold move by them, and it paid off for them. It paid off for us. We've just built a great relationship, a great friendship. And I appreciate you so much, Jamie and JJ, that you'd be willing to do that.
Yep.
So you can still stay in touch with Dan by signing up for the article of the week. If you want to relive this whole journey again, you can start from episode 1 and listen to Come Rain or Shine, because Dan, at least for a while, is going to leave the show out there. So you can have as much of it as you want. Start from the beginning and listen all over again and experience Dan's journey from leaving Disney until he now moves to Australia.
Yep. And if you go to cockerellconsulting.com in the coming weeks, you will still see the lovely Valerie Cockerell appear and be available to talk about her new book, keynote speeches, leadership workshops. She's keeping the flame burning for Cockerell Consulting.
Yeah, that's great. And driven on the strength of her new book, which I just continue to hear glowing feedback for Manage Like a Mother. People like that, which Dan, I'm not saying you're competitive, but is there a little bit of that where you're really happy for Valerie and a little bit like, oh, they're saying better things about her book than my book?
I'm always happy for Valerie, but if you say anything bad about my book or worse than her book, I'm going to have a problem with you.
There was one time, this will be my last closing comment about Dan. I don't even remember what this was because it was 3-4 years ago. Dan and I did something, and then Dan turned to me and said, "This wasn't a competition, but if it was, I won."
What a jerk thing to say, but it's true. So I'm not backing away from it. I'm owning that statement.
Yeah, well, Dan, if this podcast, if Come Rain Come Rain or Shine was a competition, you won that too. So
All right. I
there,
appreciate that, Jody.
we go out on a high note. So you can keep in touch with either one of us. Find Dan at cockerellconsulting.com. There's a contact form if you don't already have his email address. I think you can still go to dancockerell.com and sign up for the monthly article of the week. I don't know what
That's
else
right.
to call it, Dan. The monthly article of the week.
Well, it could be article of the month.
Oh yeah. Well, internally though, we've always called it AOW. So I guess it's AOM now. I don't.
AOM. There you go.
All right. I do kind of like the catchy monthly article of the week, but that might be confusing. So anyway, you can sign up for that at dancockerell.com. If you want to contact me, I'm at jodymayberry.com. I do plenty of other podcasts that if you still just want to hear my voice, even without Dan, we can make that happen. But I'd love it. Dan would never ask for this, but if you want to show your appreciation for all this, please reach out to Dan. Let him know how much you love this show. You can mention it on social media, but just reach out, send Dan a note, wish him good luck, thank him for 5.5 years of Come Rain or Shine. I know I've liked it. I've just really liked doing this with Dan, and I mean, the show is Come Rain or Shine, which you could also say for better or worse, but yet here after 5.5 years, Dan's leaving us. So
There you
I
go.
don't, yeah, I don't know. We'll just leave that one there. But all right, Dan, it's been a real treat. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to the very last episode of Come Rain or Shine.